I abandoned my family, and I don't regret it. I'm sitting in my RV outside a coffee shop, tapping away at these words with free Wi-Fi. I've gone over it in my head many times, but I feel like writing it down will help me make sense of it. A little over a week after D-Day, wife 36F, me 37M, and daughter 13F, I abandoned my family. It's been almost 6 months since that day. I was completely unaware of it by chance. I believe we had a wonderful marriage, a lot of intimacy. We would talk for hours about things. We had regular date nights. We shared personal hobbies. We were both in good health and in pretty good shape. It's great, or at least I thought so. My wife, let's call her Eve, has cheated on me, so she obviously prefers another man to me. And if she can betray me like that, she can't possibly love me. I thought she was my best friend. I guess not. In retrospect, I probably saw things through rose-tinted glasses. I actually believed my family cared about me and that I was loved. I was a fool. I come home from work and there's a safety training seminar I have to attend. She was sleeping on the sofa, and a message with an emoticon suddenly popped up on her phone. I also used these emoticons when I messaged her. I peeked at her phone and found out what had been going on for at least 5 months. I knew about the AP, as we called him, Adam, a colleague of hers from university. I had even been to his house for a barbecue and met his family. He was married with 3 children, the youngest just 2 years old. As I read the messages, a thought suddenly occurred to me that completely changed me. As I read their messages, I went from loving Eve above all else to hating her to a blankness, not just about her, but numb to everything. I photographed the messages and went to bed. I didn't sleep at all, just stared at the ceiling. The next day, Eve was angry with me because I hadn't woken her when I slept. She complained about a sore neck from sleeping on the sofa all night. I didn't really listen, but I remember thinking that everything had become blurry and that someone had turned down the volume of the world. I was a little surprised that I didn't care. I almost should have been furious at breakfast, but I didn't say a word. My wife and daughter were having a good time chatting, and they didn't seem to notice anything unusual about me, or even that I was there. But I did feel like I wasn't myself. I felt like I had become a stranger, someone I didn't know or understand, wearing the clothes of the old me. I did all the usual activities, went to work, did all the normal things, the only difference being that I stopped talking, which made me sad. I realized that no one seemed to notice me, as if I wasn't even there. I began to understand that Eve and my daughter didn't love me. I was at home with them, but they didn't really communicate with me unless they wanted something from me. They spoke to me but didn't really talk to me. Sometimes the pain would just overwhelm me. I was not doing well. I went on like this for 5 days. At dinner, Eve asked me if there was something wrong. I think I may have said 3 words to her and my daughter in that whole time. I didn't answer her question, just made a face of confusion and kept eating. She didn't seem to mind. The next day, I didn't go to work. I work for the local power company, fixing electrical wiring and stuff like that. I packed a few random things along with my camping SL hunting gear. I didn't really have a plan. I loaded my stuff into the car, drove around the neighborhood, and ended up sitting at the dinner table waiting for my wife to come home. She came home with a few bags of groceries and talked about her day while unpacking. I sat at the table miserable. She didn't even look at me when she came into the kitchen, except to glance at me. My daughter came in and did the same thing. They turned their backs on me and talked about some insignificant discounted goods. I have never felt so rejected, unappreciated, and so alone. I felt completely ignored, as if I didn't exist or wasn't worth paying attention to. I looked back at our lives and all I could see was that they simply didn't care about me, probably never had. I was just an accessory to their lives, something unimportant to them. I was just a handy and useful prop. I felt a pang of pain. I cried, but they didn't notice, so I got angry, really angry. I had a glass of water in front of me, and I stood up and threw it hard at the tiles above the sink, and it broke, and the glass splinters rained down. They turned around, furious, and they froze, not knowing what to do. When they saw my distorted, tear-stained face, the atmosphere became very awkward. Took a long time before I spoke. Eve, I know about your affair with Adam. I was surprised that things were so clear, because I clenched my teeth so hard that my daughter looked at Eve and said, "What is that? Really, Mom?" Eve started to try to explain, gave Tay a brief glance and said, "Sorry, I can explain," and then she turned back to our daughter, and they started arguing again as if I were invisible. "Hello, glass thrower." After a few minutes of watching their increasingly heated argument, I just walked out and got into my car. I looked at them again through the window as they continued to argue in the kitchen, not even noticing that I had left. I sat there for a few more minutes, then gave up and drove away. It was probably 15 minutes before you tried to call me, and then one call after another, followed by a barrage of text messages from both of you. I just ignored it all and finally turned off my phone. The next day, I took out half of our money and called my boss. I told him I didn't know when I would be back, and he told me that if I didn't show up, I would be fired. I just told him okay and hung up. I didn't care. I went to Adam's house, and his wife opened the door. I gave her a message and told her what Adam and my wife had been doing. At the end of the day, I left her crying on the stairs. I ended up staying in a cheap hotel on the edge of town. The next few days are a bit of a blur. I tried to come to terms with the situation without making any real progress. I spent most of the time staring at the wall, trying to think of reasons not to end it all. Eve's brother is a policeman, so we'll call him Bob. Bob showed up on the third or fourth day. I'm not sure how he found me. He tried to interrogate me, but I didn't say a word. Instead of arresting me, he handcuffed me. However, instead of going to the police station, he took me home. Bob dragged me into the living room, where my wife and daughter immediately began scolding me. I didn't say anything, just listened in amazement as they told me how terrible it was that I had made them worry. This went on for a while, and finally they shouted at me to say something. I stared at her for a long time, then calmly said I had nothing to say. Bob was terrified. He slammed me against the wall and yelled at me to stop talking to his sister like that. I took great satisfaction in Bob's violent reaction. I don't know why it made me so happy. I laughed. Bob's wife had left him 4 months ago. I smiled pitifully at Bob. "Did you hit your wife, Bob? Is that why she left you, Bob?" Bob hit me hard. I fell. My wife and daughter started screaming. Their heads were about to fall off when I stood up. I just laughed even harder. I just couldn't help myself. I don't know where I was bleeding from. I saw blood on the floor. I was still handcuffed and laughing. Maybe because it was all so ridiculous. I spit a mouthful of blood in Bob's face and said, "Foo asterisk ku, Bob." Hit me again so hard that I passed out. This time I woke up in the hospital and threw up as soon as I opened my eyes, so I knew I had a concussion. Bob and my daughter were there, and they were talking to me, but I was so confused that I couldn't hear what they were saying. A nurse appeared and asked them to leave. She got me a vomit basin and called someone to clean up while she took my pulse. I told her that my family had brought me here and that they could not come near me, and that if they entered the room again, I would leave, I would just run away. She argued a little sternly that running away or even getting up would be a very bad idea for me, but that she would speak to the security guard. I never saw them again in the hospital. Finally, I felt a little peace. I wanted to report Bob so that he could be fired, but it was a small town and his colleagues would probably cover for him. I considered confronting my wife, but that didn't make any sense to me either. I decided to disappear, to become a ghost. I never wanted to have anything more to do with these people. I wrote each of them a letter. I warned Bob that if he bothered me again, I would report him. I told my daughter that Eve had betrayed me and that she would have no father in the future. Eve, I wrote a longer letter, as factual as I could make it. I told her to sell the house, that I would no longer pay the mortgage or the utilities, etc. I told her that reconciliation or even contact was out of the question, especially when she sent her brother to drag me back and beat me unconscious in front of them. I explained to her that I would never do anything for her again, so if she wanted a divorce, she would have to arrange it herself. I told her that I would disappear, that I didn't want to be found, and that if she interfered with my life again, I would simply end my own life. We would never speak again. I ended our relationship the way she had hurt me. I really regretted saying those last words. It was like I was letting her steal more, like I was letting her cause me more pain in the hospital. I made a plan to find a way to disappear. Eve delivered some clean clothes to the hospital and they were forwarded to me. One night, I went out directly via the rear fire escape. This triggered some kind of alarm. I was a little alarmed, but fortunately no one stopped me. I went back to the hotel to get my car, replaced it with a small RV, and set off. I bought a new phone. The only person I called was my father, and I told him everything and told him that if he told anyone my new number, I would never be able to get in touch, and if he needed to contact me, he could call me, and if in addition to this I needed to sign any documents, I also wanted to be left alone for the first few months. I mourned the loss of my old life, but I later realized that I was mourning the loss of an illusion, a memory that only existed in my mind, a wife and daughter who loved me, a family, friends. It was all just an illusion in my mind. These people never really cared about me. As time passed, I began to rebuild a kind of life, except that this time I was completely a phantom. I existed as a phantom in society. Now I was just a post office box. I rented a safe deposit box to store valuables and cash. I earned money by doing odd jobs, hunting, fishing, and scavenging. My spending was insignificant, so my cash reserves were actually growing. I don't pay taxes, I don't have a bank account. People ask me for my name, and I answer that my name is Fred. That's not my name, but I don't want to get involved in society or other activities. I remain as inconspicuous as at home. At least for now, I'm inconspicuous to strangers, not to those who claim to love me. To be honest, I kind of like it this way. I brew my own beer, I go where I want, I don't have any obligations, I work when I want to. I spend a lot of time relaxing in nature. I have a few friends with whom I hunt and fish. I'm in great shape, the best I've ever been. All in all, my life is getting better and better. At least no one is taking advantage of me for their own gain while pretending to care about me. I don't know what happened to my wife and daughter, old friends, or family. I don't know if I'm divorced now or if I have to pay child support. I don't know what happened to the house. I really don't care. My father tried to give me information a few times, but I flatly refused. He's the only person who I occasionally talk to about my old life. I feel free, relaxed, content, even happy. Even though I don't have much money, I don't need much money. When I come to the end of my life, I will sell everything and burn what's left. I will make sure there is nothing of value left, nothing to remember me by. Then I will go into a national park, where no one knows me, and disappear forever. Sometimes I go to the mall, the train station, or the bus station and observe the people there. I see them, all men are sacrificing themselves just like I used to, working for societies and families that don't care about them. They work like hell, but get no recognition or gratitude from anyone. They feel guilty, under pressure, forced to keep making more and more sacrifices, which become increasingly meaningless. Nonsense. Branded clothes, big house, more, and not even a thank you. In most cases, they don't even get any kind of thanks or appreciation. Not even a smile. They try to trick themselves just like I refuse to acknowledge reality, but I see it in them just as I used to. They know deep down that I know their hollow 10,000-yard stare. I used to feel that way too, and it felt good, it got me out of trouble. Thanks for listening. Mini update. I abandoned my family, and I'm okay with that. First of all, thank you all for all the feedback and comments. I'm afraid I won't be able to reply to each one, because there are just too many to reply to. So many sad stories. There were many comments and criticisms in the private messages, most of which were reasonable. I couldn't read them all. Just as yesterday I started experiencing something similar. That day I tried to face Eve. The world became dull and I felt isolated. Anyway, I felt uncomfortable and felt I needed to log out. I called a friend who hunts and asked him to come over. We kept talking on the phone until he arrived, and the first thing he did was confiscate my ammunition, so I guess he was worried. He called my dad, who stayed with me until he arrived. I moved to another city, which took over 4 hours, and we discussed many comments that had disturbed me. I really don't remember any details, which is a bit of a problem. To make a long story short, my dad came, he took me to the doctor, and I ended up in a psychiatric hospital. The doctor suspected that I had suffered emotional and psychological trauma, possibly depression, and that the obvious indicators were numbness, an extreme desire for self-isolation, strange reaction behaviors, such as laughing at people who are being beaten, the feeling that no one loves me, feeling unworthy, withdrawal, etc. I don't know, I have to wait for more diagnosis. I don't know what they will do to me or if they can even do anything. I hope to be able to talk to my daughter in the near future, if the counselor says that there is nothing wrong with her or me, and if she is willing. My dad talked to her about the situation, and he told me that she loves me and wants to see me. Darcy, I think many of you were right. My dad is with me now, and I will be monitored around the clock for the next few days. They tried some medication, but I reacted very negatively, so they will try something else tomorrow. Bob somehow found the post and messaged me to apologize. Eve didn't tell him the real reason why I left the hotel. She just told him about the glass on the wall and left out the rest. Bob told me that after he found out, he had reported his actions to his superiors. According to him, everyone who should know already knows. He was suspended and ordered to undergo anger management training. If I file a complaint, he will be fired. He has prepared a full written confession and all the documents for me, and if I choose to do so, I only need to sign it on Reddit. If I agree to sign it, if I choose not to proceed, he will be allowed to continue working, but his salary will be reduced and his position will be downgraded, but I don't know what to do. I think I should just focus on myself for now. I currently feel a bit broken and lost, so I need to figure this out. At the moment, I don't know anything. Frankly, I feel like I need an update, and I appreciate everyone helping me except the fact that I need to ask for help. Maybe I'll update again later. Thanks again, everyone. Update 2. I have abandoned my family and I accept that. I guess that's a positive update. Thanks to everyone who has reached out. Sorry I haven't replied to everyone yet. There are so many messages I can't reply to them all. I tried, but last week my internet access was restricted because reading some comments was very painful for me. I was very unstable at first. Anyway, I was discharged from the hospital on Friday morning. I received a lot of treatment and am now much better. I have daily treatment but no longer need to be hospitalized. I suffered the after effects of emotional trauma and have mild post-traumatic stress disorder, so my behavior is naturally abnormal. I have received intensive treatment and taken some medication. At this stage, I only take the medication occasionally when I feel overwhelmed. I still get bouts of pain and the world seems to go numb, but less frequently. Some of my behavior, especially my withdrawal, may have made things worse. I have talked a lot with my daughter, and she has told me that she has forgiven me. She never meant to make me feel insignificant. She loves me. In the first few days, I didn't actually believe her, but when I got a new perspective, I realized that the doubt was all my own. I don't know how many times I've apologized to her. She started to tell me to stop apologizing. The fact is, she's moved out of her mother's house and is currently staying with my brother and his family. She gets along well with his children. My brother has told us that she can stay as long as she wants. At the moment, I'm not in a position to be a full-time parent, so she'll be staying with him for now. My brother has arranged therapy for her, and I'll do my best to be the best father I can from now on. My wife Eve has also moved out of the house and is living with her parents. My father has been paying the mortgage for me, so the house has not yet been sold. I don't want to go back there and remember all those old memories. I have decided to sell the house and move into a small house, to live in closer contact with nature and reduce my stress. I will try to rent or buy a plot of land and live as simply as possible, at least for the time being. My daughter is very enthusiastic about the idea and has been researching small houses like a pro. Adam is trying to reconcile with his wife and has completely cut off contact with Eve. Eve visits my dad's house almost every week, begging him to contact me and let me talk to her. If what her mother told me is true, Eve is unemployed, which is terrible, and hardly ever leaves the house. According to her mother, she has been alienated from almost everyone. I went to see a lawyer today and will initiate divorce proceedings as soon as possible. I bought a case of my hunting buddy's favorite whiskey and thanked him there on Saturday night. He's a true friend who may have saved my life. My wife's affair completely devastated me and my family. I was so broken down that I couldn't even see it myself. Actually, it was Reddit that made me realize that something was really wrong with me. I would never have sought help if I hadn't been driven to the brink of collapse. Until then, I had been convincing myself and telling myself that things were getting better, but in reality I was hanging on by a thread. Thanks again, everyone. Edit. I forgot to tell you guys, I called Bob today and completed the Bob case, and he will remain a police officer. Bob visited me on Thursday and he had all the paperwork ready for me to file a complaint against him. He didn't make any excuses, admitted that his actions were completely inappropriate, apologized for losing his cool, and said it was completely his fault. He strongly advised me to press charges against him, but I kept thinking about him. I had seen him get in the way of a punch to protect an elderly woman who was being attacked. His colleagues, they always said he would go the extra mile to help someone. I also knew why his wife had divorced him. Bob didn't earn much, but he donated 10% of his salary and volunteered 3 days a week to help the homeless. Apparently, his ex-wife couldn't stand that and divorced him. Bob is a good man, and once he lost control. I'm lost, and for 6 months I was happy to take beatings to make sure people like him could continue to do good. He took me to see the homeless people he helps today, and at my insistence, he needs to continue doing what he's doing. For month update, I abandoned my family, and I'm happy about it. First of all, thank you. I still get a lot of support via PM. You're all fantastic. I've had a lot of therapy and am now quite stable. My daughter is fine. I'm like a different person now. Apart from my daughter, I have a hard time trusting people. I prefer to be alone, and I generally keep a low profile. I don't know if I can say I'm broken inside, but I guess you could say I'm broken compared to my old self. But I'm not unhappy. I've been doing very well as a semi-recluse. I've just changed now. I think the house has been sold and I've bought a small house where my daughter and I live. It's not one of those tiny houses you see on TV, but has 2 separate bedrooms and a combined living room kitchen. It's on a forested hillside in a secluded location, with a porch as big as the house and a great view. I really like the peace and closeness to nature of my new home. I am divorced or about to be, and it is just a matter of going through the formalities, which is expected to take 3 months. STBXW begs me to give her a second chance almost every day, but she doesn't make any demands on me, and she doesn't defend herself. She admits her infidelity. We went to mediation and she gave me everything, including all our possessions and full custody. Her only request is to be allowed to visit her daughter frequently in order to repair her relationship with her. She also offered to cook and clean, but I don't want to feel like I owe her anything. I'll continue to keep the household running. It's not a big place anyway, and I need some household chores for my daughter to do. I don't want her to grow up to be a spoilt brat. My ex-wife and I have a very tense relationship. We'll have to see how things go. You're trying to tell me this is a ploy to get back together with me. Don't worry, she's not being sneaky at all. She told me straight out that she hoped we could find a way back together and that she would work hard to do so. If I set boundaries, she promised to respect them, so from my point of view, I have no problems. I told her that I wanted to end the relationship, but that our relationship was irreparable and that we would raise our daughter together. And that was it. I insisted on a separation because it is cumbersome to revoke full custody after a divorce. I'm clear-headed now and want my daughter to maintain contact with her mother. I've forgiven her and moved on. From now on, I'll live my life my way. As for the property, I'll give her half at the last minute or directly after the divorce. We accumulated these resources during the marriage, so it's only fair that she gets half, but I really want to know if she'll actually give me everything. She is very, and I think it helps my recovery. Some people would say she is a complete waste of space, and she is undergoing counseling, including family therapy. For the sake of my daughter, I am determined to make up for my mistakes as much as possible. My daughter is very perceptive, and I believe she has forgiven me, but she is watching my behavior towards her mother very carefully. I am determined to set a good example, so I will set an example when posting information online. I was really bad at that point, and fortunately I was stupid enough to post on Reddit. I don't even know why I posted there, but I got the feedback I needed, and it got me out of a bad situation. Dealing with the aftermath has been really hard, but I'm finally starting to settle down. Even though our family and marriage were destroyed, we'll eventually be okay. Thanks again, everyone.